constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We've got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Good evening, viewers in Guyana and around the world. Welcome to the Globespan 24x7 live talk show. Tonight we have a special segment that comes to you with the kind compliments of Mr. Nohar Singh and the Globespan team. The topic that we will be discussing tonight is the GECOM's February timeline and the international communique that was issued today. Now, before we get into the discussion, we're awaiting two of our other participants who will be joining us momentarily. While we await on them, we will start nevertheless. So before we jump into the discussion, it is important for us to take a minute and let us reflect on a few things on our history to put tonight's discussion into context and to make sure that it has meaning. 53 years ago, we declared to the world that Guyana is an independent nation. We're a democracy and we will manage our country, our economy, and our people. Over those years, our democratic institutions have been tested many times over, but it always comes out successful in the end, but not without serious economic and human cost. Today, we find ourselves in a very similar situation where the decisions that we make as a nation will decide whether we have a successful future or whether we collapse further. So we have with us three distinguished gentlemen, the first of whom is Mr. Christopher Ram, who is an attorney at law and a political commentator. And the other two individuals that are joining us is Mr. Timothy Jonas, attorney at law and a member of the New and United Guyana, and Dr. David Hinds, a WPA member and a professor of African and Caribbean Studies. These individuals are no stranger to us. We know them, so tonight what we will do, we will lean on their wisdom, their experience, and their knowledge to guide us through the questions that we have and help us to make sense of all that is happening today. So I would like to begin first, before we jump into the content of the discussion, to say to our panelists that we have one objective at the end of the discussion. And that objective is we would like for the Guyanese people to have a better sense of all that happened today, but more importantly, have a sense of where we go from here as a country. So with that in mind, I would like to start off first by acknowledging two incidents of fact. Earlier today, the Guyana Elections Commission issued a statement, a letter to the president indicating to him that the Elections Commission is in a position where we'll be able to deliver credible elections at the end of February 2020. Subsequent to that, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, through their embassies and their diplomatic offices, issued a public statement that says, and I quote,
Hello?
"The United States of America to Guyana, His Excellency, Her Excellency Ambassador Sarah Ann Lynch, the United Kingdom High Commissioner to Guyana,
I want to lose one of your things. I'm on a TV program right now. I leave one of your rooms.
Ambassador to Guyana, His Excellency Ambassador Fernando Pons Kant, if I pronounce that correctly,
if you bring the same charge, yeah.
They issued a joint statement, and that statement says, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union thank the Elections Commission for devising a proposed election timeline for conducting general and regional elections. However, we deeply regret by passing September 18, the government is currently in breach of the Constitution following its failure to adhere to the decisions of the CCJ on June 18 and its consequential orders. The situation comes at great cost to the people of Guyana. The prevailing political uncertainty undermines Guyanese institutions, compromises economic opportunity, and delay development in Guyana. It also says unequivocally in that statement that the government is in breach of the Constitution, and that it presents some difficulties for the international community to support the development needs of Guyana. The letter in and of itself is strongly worded, and there has been a lot of discussion since it was issued in the public. So I want to take the first question, and I want to go to Mr. Christopher Ram. Help us make sense of what this statement means, break it down for us in simple terms, and more importantly, talk about what you envisage are the consequences behind this communique.
Thank you, moderator, and good night. Which one of the statements you're talking about? You referred to two statements.
I'm referring to
diplomatic community.
Yes. I'm referring to the one that was issued jointly by the British High Commission, the United States Embassy, and the
thanks. Well, I think in as much and that they didn't say the government is henceforth illegal, they have all but suggested is that we need a government that is completely illegal. What would be interesting is to see what, having said that, those countries were now to do in terms with dealing with an illegal government. It's clear that the government has lost its mandate, has lost its constitutional right to govern, but we know as they've ignored the parliament, as they've ignored the courts, they will continue as though nothing has happened.
Are we still on, Mr. Ram?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
I seem to have lost you just now with some technical difficulties. Would you mind restating the substantive portion of your response.
Summary.
Hi, Mr. Ram, are you there?
Hi?
You're still with me?
Yes, I am.
Yes. We lost you for a few minutes there, so I'm just asking if you can restate the substantive portion of your response.
Well, let me just sum up, because I'm not sure where we were left off. Is that the diplomatic community has said in diplomatic language that the government is now unconstitutional, having breached the constitution. It's now unconstitutional, it's unlawful, and it has lost its mandate. What I posed at the end is, what is the diplomatic community now going to do in whether or not they will do business as usual with a government that they themselves have now admitted is unconstitutional and illegal?
So can we, just to spin off from what you just said, to be clear, in the letter, the letter clearly states, it says, the government is currently in breach of the Constitution. Does that equate to being unconstitutional, and also does that equate to being illegal?
Well, the Constitution is the supreme law, and if you're in breach of the Constitution, then the act is clearly unconstitutional and unlawful. But I'd love to hear what the other guest, Timothy Jonas, would have to say on this issue.
So I will pivot exactly to Mr. Jonas. I would like
Thank you.
Sure.
The more I think about the situation that we are in, the more I realize that we nitpick on definitions and split hairs about the difference between illegal and illegitimate and unconstitutional, and none of that really has any meaning. There's only one rule in a fight, and the only rule that there is that you win or you lose. And I think that what is being realized now is that there is a 50-year-old fight between the two large parties. And in that fight, there is a winner, there is a loser. And insofar as the winner is concerned, we can go on all night trying to talk about what's unconstitutional and what's illegitimate, because you have a winner and a loser. Right now, the government is of the opinion that they are in power, and everything else is hot air. To my surprise, even pressure from the international community apparently is now hot air. And the real question is not whether you're unconstitutional or whether you're illegitimate or whether you've overstayed. Everybody knows that they've overstayed. The question is there any leverage to get the powers that be to do the right thing? That's all it boils down to.
So I want to pick up on something that you said. Let's not worry about all the technical differences between being in breach of the Constitution, unconstitutional, and whether it's legal. We all know that the no confidence motion was successful. It was constitutionally passed, and we know the CCJ issued its consequential orders. But where we are today, how should the business community, businesses today who are now waking up tomorrow morning and having to make payments, having to do transactions with companies abroad, having to do anything internationally, how should they take what is happening today, and how does that affect the decisions that they have to make? I'm gonna go with you, Mr. Jonas.
Well, again, I think what you're doing there is you're introducing another red herring that doesn't really affect the one rule in this fight. Is there a business in Guyana that's going to wake up tomorrow and decide that they will no longer trade with their trading partners, local or foreign, or that they will not open their doors or pay their employees or accept customers? Life goes on. Life has always gone on for the little folk. There has been no good life. There has been no good life under the previous regime. There's no good life under this regime, except for those in power, those in the regime. So we can ask all of these questions, but all they are is slight glances. The single question is there leverage, whether in the international community, whether economical, however, to get the people in power to do the right thing?
And we'll come to that in just a moment. Mr. Ram, I want to come back to you and see if you can offer some light on what this means for the business community. I want to take this in step, and we're going to come to some of the other issues in a moment. Do you think what consequence does this have for the business community at this moment?
Can I come in?
Dr. Hinds, you're with us.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. I'll come to you in a moment.
Okay.
Mr. Ram?
The line went bad, so I didn't hear your question.
No, I was saying before we pivot to the other issues, I want you to give us a sense from the business community. What is the impact of the two events that we have today on the business community when they wake up tomorrow morning?
Well, I don't think there's a lot that's going to change between tonight and tomorrow morning in terms of the business community. What I think we need to do is to look at what has happened in the 270 days since we've had the motion of no confidence. And Mr. Jonas said the single question. Well, we know the answer. The government is just not complying. So what do we do? But to get to the business question, look, the economy has been having serious problems for some time now. The reserves are now down at about half of what it safely ought to be. The exchange rate, if you were to go, yes, the exchange rate at the official level is being properly managed by diktat and fiat. But if you were to go on the street, the value of the Guyana dollar has been declining. If you look at the growth areas, bauxite, rice, sugar, the economy, and those are the productive sectors, the economy has been doing very badly. Sugar is probably about 25 million from over 100 million. Now, one would ask, where is all this money coming from? One hears that there is lots of gold coming out of Venezuela and being sold in Guyana. That has serious business implications because we are in fact violating a blockade that the Americans have imposed on Venezuela. So the business community is being directly affected. The economy is being affected. Yes, we hear the IMF in their own guarded language did say that we've got growth and oil is going to be good. But if you were to look, stay at the gold, much of it, as I said, Venezuela, you've got two foreign gold companies. What you have from them would be royalty, would be wages and local purchases. The money is not staying here. Those proper financial management, they just bring back as much money as you need. So if you look at all the key elements of an economy, it has suffered badly as a result of this, what Mr. Jonas has said, is this fight. But we can't just dismiss it as a fight. It has serious implications, politically, diplomatically. I'm not sure that Granger should even want to offer the United Nations. Yes, a country must have a head of state. But who does he? He himself is unconstitutional. So I wouldn't just dismiss these things as esoteric concepts. But to answer your question on the economy, there are serious consequences which we have faced, and come oil, until we can start fixing some of our laws before oil starts to flow, then the outflow of money from the petroleum sector is going to be so substantial that we really will not get the kind of returns that we ought to get, even in the bad situation of the contract we have.
And so I want to pull Dr. Hinds into this discussion before we drift too far away from the discussion. Dr. Hinds, I apologize for the technical difficulties that we had at the beginning. But just to recap quickly, we're trying to make sense of the statement that was issued today by the ABE countries. So can you pitch in and talk to us about the implication or the consequence, specifically on the issue that these countries have acknowledged and declared to the world that Guyana, the government, is in breach of the Constitution, and it will hinder their ability to support the development of Guyana. What do you make of that statement?
Well, those countries are reflecting their own interests. And I respect that they are doing that. They have their own interests to protect, and they have an interpretation of the situation that reflects their own interests. I beg to disagree with the conclusion that they have come to. It may serve their interests, but not the Guyanese interest. I do not see breach of any constitution. I want somebody to tell me that ensuring that there is free and fair elections with a credible list, how that is a breach of the Constitution. What we have is Article 66, that is very clear that with a no confidence vote, we must have elections in 3 months. But that is not the end of the issue. There's Article 67, which says very clearly that the life of the government could be extended in order to satisfy Article 66. Obviously, you can't be saying that because Article 66 says that you must have an election in 3 months, you're going to have an election in which the Elections Commission is saying that it is not ready for. That will be a breach of the Constitution. If you are going to have an election in which the voters list is not ready, those who are there to direct the election are saying it's not ready, that is going to be a breach of the Constitution. So I think what persons are asking us to do is, first of all, to read one section of the Constitution in isolation from the other sections of the Constitution. And I find that to be highly dishonest. You know, like I just can't understand how learned people are trying to fool Guyanese people like that. Now, the US and the other countries can say what they say. They've always said that. They've said that for 400 years, for God's sake, right? And I respect their right to say that. But I beg to differ. My argument here is that there's not been any breach of any constitution. The position that the government has taken is to ensure that you have respect for what the Constitution says about the no confidence vote, but also respect for the electoral integrity of the situation. And I think the two have to be read together. Now let me deal with this question of business. Look, we are creating an issue. I don't see foreign businesses saying we're not coming to Guyana because they have some constitutional problem. They're coming. I don't hear Exxon saying stop pumping oil because we're not going to pump oil next year because there's no constitutional crisis. As far as the local private sector is concerned, they've been behaving in an obscene way since May 19, 2015. They themselves have been destabilizing the economy, withholding their own investment. So they're creating a problem. And so therefore, this nonsense about effects of business and so on, I have absolutely no use for it.
So, Dr. Hinds, I want to pause you there for a second, and I want to ask this question. So, are you saying that, and I'm throwing this out to all our panelists, is the government in a position to be making deals, signing contracts, or engage in any of those substantive financial decisions at the end of September the 18th? And if should they be?
Yeah. My view is that now that GECOM has indicated a timeline for election and that the president has indicated that he will abide by that timeline, it means that we are now in electoral mode and the government has to operate differently. I had no time for a caretaker government before I disagree with the government calling itself an interim government with a tier government. I think now that the Elections Commission has said elections can be held, the president is going to abide by that. I think the government has to wind down now in terms of things that it would do. Any government in any situation, once elections are being called, they have to wind down, and this government should do that. That's my form.
So
not because it's an illegal government, but because elections are imminent.
Mr. Jonas, I want to shift to a different question to you. The letter that GECOM sent today to the president, the Chief Justice said that GECOM will be in a position to deliver credible elections at the end of February of 2020. First off, is that a satisfactory timeline?
When you've reached no man's land, as we have, when you are now in a wilderness that is totally outside any realm contemplated by the Constitution, you really have to reach for any straw to see if you can get back to where you should be. And the truth for me is that the only straw we have is that although her predecessor, unlawfully and unilaterally appointed, had 2 years to do whatever he did, when Justice Singh was appointed correctly and properly, following the constitutional prescript at long last, with the approval of both the leader of the opposition and the president, thus armed with the approval of both sides and enjoying the confidence of both sides, she needed to decide what the state of affairs was, and if there was a problem, how to remedy it. Now, Dr. Hinds, with all the happiness of a victor in a fight, has used half, ignored half, and come to a conclusion and said, to hell with everybody. We've seen that before, and we've seen it again. We are in a constitutional wilderness, but all we can do is say that if Justice Claudette Singh, having looked at the situation, has come to the conclusion that GECOM has failed its mandate, has failed the people of Guyana, has failed its constitutional obligation to continuously renew the 2001 list as the legislation required it to do, so that in order to correct that process, a time frame is needed. I don't think it is open to anyone to second guess her. She is the only person who makes that commission truly autonomous. Here in Guyana, we are accustomed to hairline majorities, and the unilateral appointment of Patterson by the president created a majority in parliament, in GECOM, which meant it was not autonomous, it was not independent, it was a creature of the president and did what he wanted. It was a creature of the government and did what the government wanted. That's not the case now. Now we have to find a way to get back to some vague resemblance of where we should be constitutionally. And the only way to do that is to acknowledge and respect the approach taken by Justice Claudette Singh, whether we like it or not, and to ensure that we have elections by February. The president has been misleading the people of Guyana by suggesting that he should not set a date for elections until GECOM told him something. And you've just heard Dr. Hinds talk about the government's need to make sure there's a credible list. None of that is true. It's none of the president's business It's the business of an autonomous constitutional body called GECOM, and it is not for anybody except that autonomous constitutional body to tell us about the state of readiness. The president's job was not to consider the list. The president's job was to honor his mandate to call an elections within 90 days. He failed to do so. And every time he said that he needed GECOM to tell him that they're ready, he was misleading the people of Guyana, because that's not his business. That is done by an autonomous body.
Mr. Ram, you want to chime in right there?
Well, you know, we hear what the president said. The president had said that he would abide by the decision of the courts. He ignored that. Let's remember that Claudette Singh ordered a government to hold elections within 90 days without saying anything about GECOM in the Esther Pereira case. I'm not taking on anybody in this matter. I think we're dealing with facts about these countries representing their own interests. Look, there are international norms of conduct. This is not whether the Americans say it or they don't say it. It's what our Constitution requires. The question about elections. The courts have said these are not normal times. Now, I don't know where this word credible has come from. We used to hear about elections being free and fair. David Granger seems to be redefining just about everything. He said the Chief Justice's ruling was some view, and he has his own view. Claudette Singh would have wanted 200 days from the end of her appointment to her proposed date for elections. 200 days. You know what is the constitutional norm for holding of elections, even when you don't have the extraordinary situation of a no confidence? 90 days. Is GECOM so unique among countries of the world? Other countries that have had, and I would like anybody to give me an example where a government has said, we are not abiding by a no confidence motion. So she would have taken roughly 200 days when the normal time is 90. From the date of the no confidence motion, it would be approximately 420 days. Guyana has 1% of the electorate of the United Kingdom. Boris Johnson said, I am going to call elections in 6 weeks. Are we that bad, so unique, that we can't even behave to civilized norms? I don't think we're that bad. I'm not prepared to accept such a judgment of our country. We've held proper elections for decades, from 1992 right through to 2015. The Granger administration was the product of proper elections. It has decided that, look, we will revert to things of the past. 78, our government deferred its time, yes, but it used a legal mechanism. In 90, the Hoyt administration did the same thing. Now, what Granger is doing is deferring its time without even any regard for the law.
So you brought me to two important questions, and I want to segue a little bit to some questions that are burning the average person in Guyana at the moment. And the first one is, how do we relate to the head of state at this moment? Do we relate to him as a president, a dictator, illegally occupying of the office? How exactly do we relate to him? And secondly, the other issue is the average person is of the view that when they infringed on the law, they are held to the consequences of it. But here it is perceived that we have a president, we have a government that is abusing the law, the supreme law, and yet somehow they are able to escape the consequences of it. How does the average person wrap their mind around this? I'll go with you, Mr. Ramos, since we were talking before.
Well, again, moderator, I lost you for much of the time. I heard the original part. How do we relate to the president? You see, one of the things about our Constitution, our president occupies several constitutional positions. He's the head of state. A country cannot, ought not to be, and cannot be without a head of state. He's supposed to be the head of the armed forces, commander-in-chief. He's the head of cabinet. We know Chief Justice George, and the decision went right through to the CCJ that cabinet fell the moment the vote was taken. We truly are, Mr. Moderator, in uncharted waters, because you don't usually have, under the pretext of a democracy, a government or a president saying, look, I will flout the Constitution and I have power, I have incumbency, and you can't do me anything.
Mr. Jonas, how should the ordinary, and I know based on your responses so far, you're focused on the big issue here, but I want you to segue a little bit for me and help the ordinary person understand this. Are we in a state of dictatorship? For a very common and blank question.
You're again resorting to labels, Mr. Moderator. And as Chris says, we are in a wilderness. We don't know where we are. Where we are is we're outlawed. There is no law that contemplates the situation we're in. The caretaker government that Dr. Hinds rejects is what should have existed from the no confidence motion until the 21st of March. Look how long ago that was. There is no precedent for where we are now. There is no precedent for where we are now. So when you ask us to draw conclusions and you ask us to find some kind of norm, some kind of parallel, you're asking us to do the impossible. Now, for the ordinary man, all he can do is what all of us can do. You wake up in the morning, you go to work, life goes on, and you wait to see how these two large political parties continue to wreak havoc in our country. That's all you can do.
I want to jump in right there with you. I want to jump in right there on the issue that I know this is so often the easiest thing for us to do. When we have a situation like this, and you rightfully said, we're beaten down to our toes, and sometimes we're losing hope, and we're saying, well, we just get on with our life. But is that necessarily how we would be able to come out of the situation that we're in?
Where do you live, Mr. Moderator?
Not a question of importance at the moment.
That is of critical importance.
I think it is. It's very important.
That is of critical importance, Mr. Moderator.
Feel free to draw the distinction. I'm all ears.
Well, since you are all ears, I am not a rabble-rouser, and I will never encourage a Guyanese to take a risk that I wouldn't take. We are living in a place where everyone is afraid of victimization, not just from one side, from both sides. We have seen rabid, horrible behavior from this group and from the previous group. Guyanese know about victimization. They know about retaliatory measures by those in power. They know about being excluded from contracts. They know about being the focus of police attention without any justification. We have seen people shackled and brought before the courts by various new police groups. No convictions, because fortunately so far the judiciary remains resilient and independent, but we have seen victimization. Moderator, do not sit where you are comfortably and talk about what Guyanese should do in this hard country.
I will at no point in time endeavor to instruct. I only seek your guidance and advice on what people should do, because clearly we have to get out of the situation. Dr. Hinds, I want to loop you into this conversation. And I hear you all that you have said before, but I have a very specific question, which is, where do we go from here? From your party, where exactly do you go from here? And what should the Guyanese people look forward to?
My party is the Working People's Alliance, and I am not here speaking on behalf of the Working People's Alliance or on behalf of the government. So where do we go from here? From my reading of the situation, we begin to prepare for elections after February 20th. It's as simple as that. I don't think there's anywhere else to go. We should have gotten to this point a long time. After the CCJ's ruling in June, the two political actors should have gotten together with GECOM and work out an election timeline. They failed to do that, and it was left to the chair of GECOM, one person, to make a decision to be, because that's what it came down to. The two parties sides were fighting over each other, and the chairwoman decided here, this is what I'm going to conclude, and this is what I'm going to tell the president. That should have been done in June, when the CCJ advised the two sides to marry principle with practicality. The government side, I know for a fact, were willing to go to elections in December. As Mr. Jaglio and Mr. Granger sat down and consult with GECOM, we would have been having elections in December. But no, the PPP was concerned with this thing about the law. Article 6 saying this, and this, that is the beginning and the ending, and that's why we are where we are today. So the only way we have to go is to begin to prepare for elections in at least by March. I want to address an issue you raised about whether ordinary people should call dictator and all those things. So I just come from a public meeting of 200 ordinary people in a village called Beirut. And those ordinary people are not calling the president a dictator. They're not calling the president all those names that you're calling there. So it seems to me that you are taking the narrative of one side and calling it the views of ordinary people. It is the views of ordinary people of one side. The other side is not doing that. So
not at all. I want to get your feedback because I'm plugged into the discussions of people on the ground, and so that feedback was important. But I want to direct you to something that you just said. When the no confidence motion was passed, immediately the president and the prime minister at the time acknowledged that the motion was passed, and they declared to the nation that they will honor the Constitution. We know how far we have come from there. Now, there is now no more excuse. So, should the nation look forward to seeing whether that they will have elections in February of next year, or should they expect further delays?
Well, we hope that the PPP does not delay further, because what has been happening is that one side gets a leg up and the other side engages in things that turn out to be delayed. And so one would hope that the PPP accepts that, look, we are at the end of the rope. We should have had these elections before. We are now likely to have them in March. Let's begin to prepare. I hope nobody goes to court anymore. Nobody's saying, let us get to elections. We should have had those elections before now. We should have had those elections in December. And so therefore, the way to go now is go to elections. The international community, the big countries have, put out a veiled threat. And I disagree with my friend Chris here. That's their business. I don't think that is consistent with international norms. That is consistent with an old austerity where large countries try to dictate to small countries what should be the rule of law. Something that they don't adhere to in their own country. So I don't buy that thing that this is international relations. I think it's about the interests of those countries, and they have the right. They have the right to be consistent in what they see as their interest. It doesn't mean that we have to accept it. So I'm very, very clear about that. The way to go now is to let us have these elections as early as possible after the end of February and get this thing over. I don't think there is this big astronomical constitutional crisis that we've talked about. Constitutional scholars will no doubt have a field day in the coming years as to what has happened. I agree with my two colleagues that we are in uncharted territory. But I disagree with them that having said we are in uncharted territory, well, at least Mr. Ram is drawing conclusions about what is wrong and what is right. If you're in uncharted territory, you speculate, you allow things to work themselves out, and so forth. Of course, the political actors are important here. And I am not hearing from those who are talking about the breach of the Constitution, the responsibility of the political actors in pushing us to that point.
So Dr. Hinds, we're wrapping up and we're heading into the last 7 minutes of the program. So since we're on you, I want to give you the opportunity to say to the Guyanese people exactly what should they look forward to in the next couple of weeks as we head into the new year, or we enter into the end of the year, and what would your advice be to the Guyanese public? Give me a wrap-up statement.
Well, my wrap-up statement is not to advise the Guyanese public. My wrap-up statement is really to speak to the leaders, because I think that it is the political level this problem is. I don't think this problem is constitutional. I think this problem has to do with the kind of political culture that we've developed in these last 60, 70 years. It has to do with the fact that we have not paid careful attention to our Constitution to ensure that the Constitution is consistent with the realities of the Guyanese situation. I continue to believe that we should not have the same criterion by which you pass a simple bill into law, that we use that same criteria to bring a government down. I think we need to address that constitutional malady as we go forward. So for me, it's about the lessons we should draw from what has happened over the last year and to find a way to correct them. So constitutional reform becomes important for me. Secondly, that if I want to say anything to ordinary people, and these are the supporters of the PPP and supporters of the coalition party, that you have to put more pressure on your political leaders to behave in a mature way. And I think we are giving those leaders a pass when we hold on to this theoretical construct of breach of the Constitution. I really don't think that is the issue. The issue is that we have two stubborn political sides that are grounded in this notion of superiority of their side and so forth, and that is where the problem is. I think that's where it will have to be solved.
Okay, so Mr. Jonas, there are people who are looking at the show who clearly might be supporters of the Anuj party, and there are other people who might not be supporters of the party. Speak to them, speak to all Guyanese as to where we go from here. What is your advice and how we go from here? And wrap up with what happened today for us.
Over the last years, we have seen a game played by two parties that are callous and have no regard for the interests of Guyanese. Their only interest is feathering their own nests, filling their own pockets by any means, and remaining in power by hook or crook or by any means necessary. Whenever the elections come, whether it's November, December, February, or August, do not fall for the fallacy, do not be misled into thinking there are only two choices. Those two parties have caused enough harm. There is nothing that you can do to leverage an early election. But what you can do is try to stay back and stay out of the ugly game that the two parties play, that polarize us, a country that lives in harmony for most of the time. Do not allow these parties to engender greater ethnic division, greater suspicion, mutual suspicion and distrust based on racist and ethnic grounds. Do not allow them to do that. Recognize the harm that they are causing, understand that this cycle needs to be broken, and look for a third option. We need to stop this nonsense now.
So, Mr. Ram, I'm back to you, and you of course you're in your independent position and in a commentator position. But again, Guyanese, from regardless of their political leaning, there's a lot of anger on the ground. There's a lot of frustration on the ground, and you and I can talk about all the mishaps from now, and we can dot them from the last 50 years, 60 years. But how, where, what's the sense forward? Where do we go from here? What would you like to see, or what would be the best case scenario out of here?
Unlike my two co-panelists, I don't have a political stake in all of this. So I don't have to make any political appeal. I have heard one said that Pope Jagdeo doesn't do for the delay. The duty to call elections or falls on the president. How come Jagdeo? That boggles my mind. Now, we've seen how political parties have behaved in the past. It's not too long ago. Now, I was a victim of this slow fire, mo fire on the east coast of Demerara. I think my friend David Hinds knows about it. And talking about East Coast, I was at a meeting this afternoon where the group was talking about oil and the incompetence of this government. So, you know, they're different. Depending on which group you go, you hear different things. Now, my view is this. I cannot, in good conscience, support and participate anything that is improper and illegal. This government is illegal. I don't care how you spin it, whether you want to blame the white people for it or not. Facts are facts. This government has no authority to continue in its place. As I said, I got issues about head of state. And you know, the Constitution talks about what should really happen when you don't have a president. Nobody wants to go there because that's when the chancellor should come in, etc. My own view is that I would not be surprised if the political opposition were to say, look, we withdraw all participation and cooperation with an unlawful government. It seems to me simply fallacious that you could say, look, you're unlawful, but let me deal with you. And so I think we're in to just wish, oh, we're going to go move the elections and people are going to forget all that has happened, forget the incompetence and the corruption and the dictatorship and the unilateral conduct by the president. That's not so easy to forget. Are headed for some difficult times. And it's not going to help the poor people because we might think these are esoteric issues, you know, and it doesn't filter through. But I hope I gave sufficient economic indicators to show what political misgovernance does. And you know, we're moving into oil. This is the classic case of the resource curse. Those who want to invite it, let them do so. I will not be party to that.
So I was just informed by our team at Globespan that we have a few minutes more, and I have a question that came in from our viewers, and that is, should there be international sanctions?
You asking me?
Mr. Jonas, I'm gonna come to you. Mr. Jonas?
Oh, okay.
How does the Guyanese say that measures should be taken which will cause more hardship to Guyanese? That's what you're asking me. What kind of sanctions do you recommend that do not hurt the people at the bottom immediately and much more meaningfully than they hurt anybody else? I don't think that that can be the answer. The answer has got to be that we account for ourselves and recognize that we get what we deserve. And until we can step away from the cycle that we have been encouraging, we will continue to get what we deserve. I'm afraid there's no easy way to say it. I heard Dr. I heard the two commentators speak about going to meetings. The thing is, there is not a Guyanese living in this country who is satisfied with the party that he supports. There is not a PPP supporter that says, my party has done a good job. Here are the good economic policies that I can point to. They are not corrupt, they are competent. And I promise you, the APNU supporters are not preaching the competence and honesty and integrity of their party and the good life that they're enjoying now. Everyone is disappointed. Everyone is disaffected. Everyone sees the potential and the possibilities, and everyone sees that they are not being realized because of corruption, because of incompetence in both parties. You want to talk about sanctions from foreigners? We are being sanctioned by our own incompetence. And until we realize that and move away from it, it will continue.
Dr. Hinds?
Sanctions are imposed as a last resort for very important infractions and very egregious infractions on the part of government. As I argue that we have an impasse, a political impasse in Guyana coming out of the constitutional uncertainty, and I don't think that that warrants international sanctions. That's one. Two, we have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy fighting for our dignity, our national dignity, and I think it will be an assault on dignity if we have a division in our country, if we have disagreements in our country, and we feel that the solution is to invite international sanctions. I think it would be an insult to our struggle to free ourselves from enslavement, from colonialism, from indentureship, and our continued struggles against neocolonialism. So there's absolutely no way in which I can, at this point, support international sanctions. We are not at the point where Venezuela is. And even in the case of Venezuela, I would be hesitant about international sanctions. We are not at that point. And I think people have to come to a point in terms of the political disagreements and say that, you know, if we push this thing and give this thing characteristics that don't belong, then we are pushing ourselves down that trail again, that we have to fight this whole battle for our national dignity again. No. We ought not to go there. International sanctions ought not to be something that we're talking about in this time.
Mr. Ram, should there be and could there be sanctions behind of this if we don't have changes that the international community might recognize as acceptable or within the confines of international norms?
Who's that question directed to?
You, sir.
Because every time you're about to ask me a question, I wonder if you're setting this up, Mr. Moderator. Listen, I can't. First of all, we have to understand that there are degrees of sanction. You have the extreme situation of military blockade. I don't recall my friend Professor Hinds talking about sovereignty and insult to national dignity when the European community withheld funds from the Ramatar government when it sought to prorogue Parliament in response to a motion of no confidence. So there are different levels of sanction. I go back to this position. If you say a government is unlawful, forget what word you want. How can you, in any good conscience, decide I will continue to finance that government, to perpetuate the same kind of conduct for which you have criticized and chastised it? It seems to me anomalous. And so I'm neither asking nor am I hoping. I would not be surprised if those very countries were to say, you know what, we can no longer do this because the very acts that we perform are now in doubt. The oil contracts. I would love to talk with the same group on these oil contracts and what we do, because that's what people are concerned about. When you think of the billions and billions that incompetence and corruption have caused this country, that's the kind of discussion we need to have. And maybe we should have it before whenever elections come. And I'm not certain it's going to be taking place in February. You're going to hear, oh, it's martial money. That would not be an opportune time. This is playing to a particular agenda. And unfortunately, the political players all have an interest and have their own views on how it should be dealt with.
All right. So I think we have come to the end of our session. I know we started with the intention and the goal here of talking to the Guyanese people and giving them a sense of the two events that happened today and some sense of where we go from here as a nation. I think it would be safe to say that despite of our best attempt, we have moved that needle a little bit forward, but there is still a lot that is clouding in the air. I will offer one last minute to each and every one of you if you have a closing statement that you would like to make. Mr. Jonas?
Chris said something that I think is interesting, and it comes back to the attempts by both parties to avoid what really should be the issues that voters think about. He opened his remarks, in fact, talking about the decline of sugar, rice. We all know that is in decline, timber is in decline. In fact, the only thing that's held this economy up is the peripheral investments which have been made by oil-related industries, the service industries that are coming in to do business. Every other sector has shrunk as a result of mismanagement and lack of vision by the regime. I would like to invite anyone from the regime, come and let's have a discussion. Let's have a talk about their economic policies. And I would like to invite anyone from the previous regime, the author affecting so the voting nonsense again as a football, and the two parties are kicking it around the place. Let them defend their territory in a meaningful way. Let them discuss their economic policies, demonstrate to the people, explain to the people what advances they have made socially, economically for our benefit. Let them explain why, after 52 years, we are second poorest to Haiti with all the resources we have. Let us talk about what is relevant and meaningful, so that the people can be informed and the people can see what they're really being dealt with, what hand they've been dealt and how they're being treated. I think Chris is right about that. It's time for us to pretend that we're civilized, pretend that we really are voting on principle, and for the two parties to pretend that they are meaningfully contributing, that they are meaningfully leading us in a direction, and let them defend themselves. I will be happy to be part of any such discussion.
Dr. Hinds, 1 minute for a closing statement.
I've heard all the emphasis that are being suggested today tonight, whether it's on the contractors per se and how much we're losing on the contract, or whether about the economic policies that Timothy has talked about. And I want to say that those things are important and we should have a discussion about them, but we should also have a discussion about the poor people, the powerless people in this country, those people that I spoke to tonight at the root were concerned. They said that even if we get 50 cents from the oil revenues that are coming in, what are we doing about poverty? And so I want to throw the issue, the direct and clear and present danger that exists among poor people. I want to throw that in the mix. We've been guilty in Guyana about talking about our petty show, single issue, as though that is all of what Guyana is. Guyana is a complex place, a complex history, a complex contemporary situation, and I think we have to have a holistic discussion about what needs to happen in our country as we come to this critical juncture of oil and gas economy.
Mr. Ram, 1 minute. Want to wrap up?
I'll probably say less than a minute. You know, I was on the periphery when the Working People's Alliance was engaging in civil resistance. David Hinds played a noble part in all of that and suffered greatly for it. I represented the Working People's Alliance at the Commission of Inquiry into the death of Walter Rodney. I'm a believer from my student days. I was student union president. I got arrested in London. I believe in struggle. I believe in non-violent struggle. I believe whenever a society just sits back and say, "Oh, let the autocrat, let the dictator do what they want. We just must peacefully accept it and go to elections." That is signaling the death knell of a country. I don't want to be a party and part of such a country. Thank you. Good night.
So I think, so gentlemen, to all our panelists, I really and sincerely want to say thanks to you for taking your time. I know you had a rough day and it's late in the hours, but the fact that you have given your time to us and to share your view, it means a lot, and it means a lot to the people. Mr. Ram, I think you ended on a very good note, which is we all have our views. How we decide to stand up and defend them is up to us. But what we would encourage everybody to do, as you all would have said in your own way tonight, is to think carefully about what you want to do and make sure what you do, you operate within the law. And I think we'll just leave the conversation there. I know this would be continuing in all different parts of Guyana tomorrow morning when we're awake. So thank you again. Thank you very much for your time. And to our viewers, good night.
Thank you, sir. David, Chris.
David and Tim, good night.
Thank you.
Good night, gentlemen.